So welcome, our brilliant and beloved colleague Justin. We so appreciate your consistent leadership and solidarity. And as always at Setsi, we begin all things by giving thanks to our creator, by giving thanks and acknowledging the original stewards of the various lands we're on. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled without compassion or compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. So Justin, can you please introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers and share a bit about your remarkable work?
Yeah, absolutely, Victor. I don't know how anybody follows an introduction after you. We should get to do the introduction. You should have to follow us. That should be the way that these things have to go. It's yeah, I appreciate the opportunity. My name's Justin Sweeney. I've worked in community economic development, community finance, social finance since 2014. It has been, a passion of mine to see communities brought back to life. Whether it was working community economic development, working in downtown revitalization projects, right? And you're seeing new young businesses coming to life in a downtown, driving traffic into the downtown core again, the community kind of rebuilding and connecting and reconnecting. And then kind of jumping out of that and saying, well, how can we get more of this? And there was always that capital question, right? How do you get more? And there's never enough money, and there's never enough grants, and there's never enough, so I was always very revenue oriented. I love the idea of that. So when I first heard about social enterprise, I was like, what a wonderful concept. This makes great sense. That was 2017 or so, right? And then 2018, I was in Alberta at the time. My wife and I had we're having our first child, and we had the opportunity to move to our home province in New Brunswick, and come back. And I got to, stand on the shoulders of a kind of a legend in the social finance, community finance space, and spent the last 5 years working with Seth Thassamakis and the team over at Kaléidoscope Social Impact, right? And did a lot of great work with them, building up their evergreen fund and expanding from doing micro lending when I first arrived to by the time I left, we had an analyst on site. We were still doing our micro lending. There was a big expansion into real estate financing, bridge financing, and acquisition financing. And yeah, it was. It's great. It was great seeing the impact, and now the last 6 months have been an absolute blessing of an opportunity to explore small, short, diverse roles with a number of impact funds and impact-oriented groups from across Canada. And so I'm doing. I guess we've reached the age. We've got some gray hair. We can start doing a little consulting. We've got that experience behind us now, Victor. We can do a little consulting. So
Listen,
it's yeah, like I'm at a wonderful place where I'm getting to work with a lot of great people and really expand on my knowledge and network and value I can bring to the community finance place. And so and I've been waiting a long time for this conversation. I look forward to it.
yeah, no, I really appreciate you, and definitely the grays are poking in. I think so we're in the same stage. But yeah, no, I just really appreciate your candor and transparency and all that you've brought to the ecosystem. I think that's we are pioneering a lot of this work, and in terms of innovation, you've been consistent not just with your solidarity, but being able to speak truth to power and just be an inspiration to many. So my next question is, what's inspiring you right now? What has you curious, or what's keeping you up at nights?
Negative income tax is what's keeping me up at night. It's like I don't know why, but I tend to I don't like about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, really started championing the call towards affordable housing and the need for more housing and the housing first model as a solution, right? As when we're looking at trying to tackle homelessness, trying to tackle, some of these challenges facing our most vulnerable populations. I've always been very open with my experiences. So I have been diagnosed with a neurodivergence. I was diagnosed initially with a mental health disorders in my 20s. Growing up, I was lucky. I kind of lived. I got to be in this very sheltered space that my parents did a lot to shelter me from what I learned was intergenerational poverty that the rest of my family, a lot of my family was experiencing. I have cousins who have never had employment, are unlikely to potentially have employment. You know, in some scenarios, there are, you know, mental health challenges, addictions tend to really fall hand in hand with a lot of those challenges. And so, you know, I witnessed a lot of loss. And so I've always kind of like, how do we fix that? How do we do better? How do we, just so people don't experience some of these like extreme forms of isolation and yeah, segregation from the community, right? Like so I mean that's always, I think, that justice, that sense of justice, that sense of, you know, wanting to see a more just world, you know, wanting to see a world where like we, it still boggles my mind that we can have a scenario where people like we walk past people who are literally homeless on the street and we don't stop and go like, holy shit, this guy doesn't have a home, right? Like, hey, like, you know, like it just blows my mind that we're at a point where we can have that level of disconnectedness between people. And so, you know, I have been a big proponent of community finance and will continue being a massive proponent of community finance and of housing. And you know, driving more housing first solutions and getting individuals into housing. But part of the, I think part of what's had me is like, you know, I've had relatives and I have, you know, people who are close who like you know, we've tried housing. We've tried, you know, we've purchased a small mobile home for one. We tried a camper trailer in order to, you know, create some housing for another. You know, you try to scramble these solutions together to support and but at the same time, because of the nature of the addictions and like if you don't have treatment and you don't have ongoing support, you know, and we saw these things destroyed, you know, there we saw the yeah. So what happened or what I'm finding right now is keeping me up is like this thought of like, okay, like if we can get them, we can get them into the housing. Like, are we going to be able to skill up individuals to house individuals enough to like attach them to the economy, or do we have to accept that we have a percentage of the population we need to create some, but simply because like I don't know if we can build in enough mental health supports and all the things that I see that would be required in order to, you know, help lift some of these individuals up and out of poverty. And it's like, you know, like when I look at these scenarios, I'm like, I can't capacity build. I can't create employment for these people. They're my family, right? I can't even create employment for them because I just like there's no employability, and and it's like, you know, you try and you try to provide support and but you know, at the end of the day, like they were making their own choices, and so that I'm like, well, so what does that mean? They have to live with $540 a month for the rest of their life and live on some, you know, basic, like, can we not, you know, give them anyway slightly better, can we not see them, you know, experiencing a quality of life where it gives them an opportunity to think about being something, like, you know, this whole concept of like, you know, lifting individuals or helping people like up and out of poverty, it really is, you know, the individuals need to be able to want to pull themselves up and out, right? And we know that. And anyway, Victor, I'm rambling on. I've got negative income tax is what we got to
Well,
do.
I don't think you're rambling on. I think that when
Sorry.
we're looking at pervasive challenges around poverty reduction, building the capacity of folks on the margins, the periphery of the economy, supporting folks with mental health supports, mental illness, mental well-being, pervasive, especially when it's close to home. So it's not something that's we can look at solely as like an intellectual exercise or like theory. Or, you know, like so once again, I just appreciate once again like your consistent transparency, authenticity, um, and the storytelling components. I feel like a lot of times we collect data in our ecosystem and we try and point at problems and try and solve problems. But those problems or these issues or challenges or lessons that we're trying to figure out and untangle collectively, like really resonate and hit home with some folks. So once again, I just appreciate the fact that you have the bravery and and the courage to be able to, you know, do some narrative building and storytelling to really amplify the voices of those that usually don't have an opportunity to share their voice, share their message. And once again, like I just appreciate you in so many ways. So it's a perfect segue. What challenges and barriers you face in your work, and what are some of the approaches you and your colleagues are taking to overcome some of these challenges and barriers?
I would say like the some of the things that we're facing currently is that lack of understanding of the narrative and lack of appreciation and capacity for empathy, especially in a lot of these community projects. You're leveraging a number of funders. There are very diverse groups of stakeholders. So being able to really kind of capture a consistent narrative, or capture a narrative that kind of speaks to the stakeholders and um, continues to engage them. That's been what I have found interesting, because you get into a scenario where I find in rural settings, so I'm speaking from a small rural setting, and this is a particular challenge that may not apply as much into a larger urban setting simply because of scales of economy and things like that. But in a smaller environment, when we're looking at the sustainability of an evergreen fund to be able to provide and drive flexible different types of capital into different community projects, the in order for that to be successful, or to create enough let's say deal flow, there was a need to do a couple different styles of lending. So let's say we want to do some social enterprise building, we want to do some housing, and we need to do some lending around that. And we also need to recognize that the huge amounts of Canadians are underfinanced, underbanked, simply don't have access to a simple little lines of credit, credit cards, a small short-term loan to fix a car. Things like that are inaccessible for a number of people, and then they end up in these predatory scenarios. And there's lots of data out there showing that when you land in a predatory scenario, if that's your first experience with banking and finance, we tend to stick. How many people still have the same banker, same bank they had when they were 12 or 13 years old, right? Because that's what of the finance world. So you just keep going back to it. So, not having these solutions creates that opportunity for the predatory lending. And so you see these different problems. And I think part of the biggest challenge that we were having was trying to communicate that, look, you know, a diverse fund with different programs can tackle all of these challenges concurrently. Um, and the challenge was getting individuals to want to see themselves in multiple spaces as an investor. So wanting to see themselves in micro lending as well as social enterprise finance, as well as affordable housing finance, right? So in the Kaleidoscope model, that was part of the challenge, was having having great use cases for this capital, and having a small geography with demand in all of these areas. And so it is, you kind of have the challenge of, do you willingly kind of ignore a facet of what you're working on? So whether that's social enterprise lending and getting more social enterprises financed and getting more capital in there in order to focus on housing, because that's what the investors want to place their capital into right now. Or do you continue pushing kind of the narrative of, look, housing is great, we will get them into housing, you can't forget about them at that point. We need I was just gonna ask, I'm like, do you have an edit feature on this as I, start saying like we but it's like, we need shit for them to do. Like it's not just going to be the housing. We need shit for them to do. So we need like the community building. We need the ways to create and keep people busy and occupied and connected to and doing things in the community. And yeah, so I mean, I love the momentum around housing right now. I think it's fantastic. But we know that it will go elsewhere in 3 to 5 years. Something else will come up and will become more prominent of an issue. And you know, these individuals, these vulnerable individuals, are still going to be at risk. And so, yeah, I think part of the challenge is, you know, giving enough longevity and autonomy to these kind of independent, bespoke funds to respond to the social realities as things evolve, because we're always chasing like years behind. And if we can't, you know, these groups like Kaleidoscope need to have capital that can be flexible, that can be driven into multitude of different opportunities, that they can represent, that they can recognize these opportunities and move towards them quickly, based on their skill and their merit. And you know, the capital will be there for them to be able to do that work. And it's, you know, it's just not getting there fast enough, right? Which was part of like you and I sitting here for 5 years waiting on the social finance fund, and then me finally, now we're having a conversation, and the only thing I want to talk about is just start a negative income tax and get them some more money. Like you know, if this is the bureaucracy and the stuff we're going to have to stand between as far as getting opportunity to like bespoke communities and those who are deserving. I mean, for one, you know, we rarely see any sort of lived experience, you know, when we're looking at a lot of the panels or the groups who are discussing and, you know, promoting this activities. You know, so we need to recognize that there are groups that are here that are always going to be here that are committed to this. And you know, I certainly understand the social finance fund and social finance as being the primary tool for, you know, giving them a lot more impact and a lot more potential. And the way it's rolled out, and you know, some of the caveats, it's not reaching the community finance the way we wanted it to. It is getting there, but it's certainly just not, I think, what we anticipated, that it could enable groups like this to go out, you know, further build capacity. We had a provincial rent bank that the province in New Brunswick launched, said they were going to launch. Very quickly just became, and rent banks are terrible for actually getting repayment. You can't hold people to repayment, but there is some voluntary repayment there that can continue to replenish the pool. But you have to have the infrastructure in place to be able to do that, right? Well, there was no infrastructure in the province of New Brunswick to be able to actually distribute this capital in any way that it could be repaid. So we're stuck in a grant giving model because we don't have infrastructure or foresight to build infrastructure to actually enable, you know, this sort of like non-market financial activity that, you know, will reach the need of these groups that are typically ignored, right? And you know, I just, social finance fund's a great way to hopefully just you know, get the capital in there while there is political will, because yeah, who knows what will be coming down the pipe. But
That is a fact. That is
there's
a
some of the challenges. We'll talk one at a
so
time.
so my next question, my second last question, and I just appreciate once again your candor. Like, I love the fact that you're very similar to me. You shoot from the hip. What is your ultimate goal, and what does success look like and feel like to you and your colleagues?
Yeah, so I mean, I am in this 100% to just not like, people have every right to self-actualization. They have every right to pursue self-improvement, to pursue a better version of themselves, to feel like they're contributing, to feel wanted and desired. Everybody deserves that. And you know, right now, like in this hyper connected, completely disconnected world, like we're losing a lot of social inclusion, right? And it's what you guys work on and do such wonderful work, Victor. And even in your coordination, by the way, thank you so much of the coordination of these conversations that you're doing. You know, little things like that, like what Setsi's doing right now with coordinating, recording, saving these, distributing, dispersing these conversations. And of course, you know, we're all following Lars and Lars's weekly updates on all the opportunities and social finance and everything like that. Like, you know, it's little things like that that then help to build. It helps build camaraderie and familiarity. People hear about concepts, they reach out to people, it builds on that, you know, more and more. So my like, I, I you know, I would like to say that, you know, I'd like to see everybody have a home, or you know, that would be the goal, but it's not really something so simple. It really is that, you know, like I grew up having totally different experiences because my clothes were slightly better and I played hockey and my cousins didn't. They were seen more like just the troublesome kids that, weren't into the sports because there was no money for sports. They didn't wear nice clothes. And of course, they had no supervision. So what are you going to get into except, probably not good behavior. And then it snowballs, right? Now all of a sudden that's your reputation, that's how you're seen. Well, you become what you're seen as, right? We live into the roles. If we're told we're something our whole life, we're told we're a problem, we're told we're, you know, that's how we're going to see ourselves, right? Um, just like I don't know if fairness and equity is possible, but I believe like that would be the ultimate goal is just for everybody to have an equitable opportunity at improving upon themselves and finding a version of themselves they're really comfortable in and they're really happy with, right? And if we can facilitate, I the way I see that being facilitated based on my own lived experiences and education and everything is through it's opportunity. It's opportunity to do things. It's opportunity to fail. It's people inviting you somewhere, right? It's people like opening up their socioeconomic classes just a little bit so that way we can actually see and understand a little bit more of what others are doing. It's like I read about things where it's we want diversity and inclusion and we're moving towards diverse, more inclusive, like these are the demands that we're putting out there. And then at the same time we're faced with challenges like Quebec seems to do really well in a lot of scenarios because they have high social capital, because there's a lot of similar values and similar, so it's we have these places where it's like we're going to have diversity but we need to accept that we have to figure out a way to be diverse and to have arguments and to have uh, you know uh, and to be accepting of it, right? Like to be able to debate things and to like I would like to be able to debate Victor on something and go out and have a drink with him afterwards and not instead go home and curse his name and badmouth him on Facebook and LinkedIn and unfollow him or something like that, right? Like it's we should be able to debate topics intellectually and still recognize that this person across from me is a kin to me, right? This is another human being with thoughts and feelings and heartfelt emotions and hopes and aspirations, that may have been supported throughout their life or may have been tossed to the side throughout their life. And every single person kind of come to has a different story, right? About how much one way or the other. And yeah, I am very, I look forward to the time when everybody has that floor exists, and that's where that negative income tax. I keep like there's got to be a floor. The ceiling, there's going to be wealth. We got to cut it off somewhere, but got to get a floor. Like that's just crazy to me. Everybody knows it's crazy. Everybody knows the system's totally ridiculous. Nobody would design it the way that things are going this way from the outset. But we also, we're very poor at mending and fixing things. So rather than, go back, remove old legislation, patch this, do that. It's what's the new thing? What's the next thing we're building? What's the next piece? And yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of times we throw the baby out with the bathwater sometimes by continuously looking for new and innovative as opposed to sometimes being willing to double down on the hard work and the long game that it's going to take to really kind of make some changes here. Like Kaleidoscope's doing well because Seth has been there for 20 years, right? It's how many different politicians, how many different anyway, how many we would have seen a lot happen over that period of time. But these organizations, these people are the ones who are sticking by this problem. And if it was an investment scenario of any other, and you saw a team sticking next to this problem, working at this problem with the diligence that a number of these groups work with, from an investor standpoint, that's these are teams worth betting on.
We're on the same page. I'm so happy we were able to close with those sentiments because I find a lot of times in terms of building anything, transience never works. you need folks that are committed. Even when we talk about the social finance fund, that file, we saw Minister Duclos come in, we saw Minister Ahmed Hussein, we saw Minister Karina Gould, and now Jenna Sud. So there's four ministers just over one file to launch a pot of $755 million of capital into the ecosystem. So that alone tells you that despite the remarkable work of these leaders and these politicians, they moved on to other files and they moved on to other work. When you bring up the example of Set the Kaleidoscope or your work for the past 5 years on the file and others, continuity and a continuity of care and succession planning and a certain level of commitment over the life cycle is imperative to see anything successful. It's the micro and the macro, that balance between the two is what helps us measure impact. Most importantly, is what creates a dynamic of trust, which truly builds innovation because it's a relational infrastructure that creates a dynamic of trust. So once again, I just appreciate your candor, your transparency, and your consistent commitments to finding ways and means to collaborate and build. Yeah, you're just always a great colleague to connect with. And as always at Setsi, we close where we began this conversation by giving thanks to the original stewards of the various lands around. We give thanks to all our ancestors, all those who toiled, with compassionate compensation. We give thanks to all our elders and community stalwarts whose shoulders we stand on as we build, share, and learn together for our collective liberation and sovereignty. Do you have any closing words, my brother?
Again, could you let me go first?
I did that
Then
intentionally. I did it just so you'd say that. Justin, it's been an
no,
absolute joy. Thank you so
I'm
much,
just
man.
so thankful for what you do, Victor. I'm thankful for these conversations, getting to listen in on them, and getting to participate in this one was, again, I was looking forward to it the last few months. I'm glad we got it in.
Absolutely, absolutely, my friend. I appreciate you.